Welcome back to the Taiwanology podcast. This is your host, Kwangyin from Taiwan's CommonWealth magazine. Just weeks ago, Taiwan's Vice President Kim delivered a rare and closely watched speech inside the European Parliament, a venue that until recently would have been unthinkable for a senior Taiwanese leader. At the same time, the number of European delegations and lawmakers visiting Taiwan is steadily rising, which is a visible sign that something fundamental is shifting. Today, we examine one of the most consequential yet still underreported changes in global foreign policy, the deepening of ties between Europe and Taiwan. For decades, this relationship was managed with extreme caution, largely confined to quiet trade and carefully calibrated exchanges under the constraints of the One China policy. But that era, some might say, is ending. The strategic calculus in Brussels and across key European capitals has changed, and the data increasingly proves it. So what's the data? According to the EU-Taiwan Tracker, a database managed by the think tank Central European Institute of Asian Studies, since the beginning of the 2020s, engagement has seen a sharp tick between Taiwan and Europe. The data shows an astonishing five-fold increase in interactions between the EU countries and Taiwan from 2019 to 2024. This acceleration is driven by three main factors: geopolitical necessity, the weaponization of trade, and a renewed focus on democratic security. However, this increase has not been uniform. The new report done by CEIAS, which we are discussing today, categorizes European countries' approach into four distinct groups, which we will be addressing later today. And the report we are talking about is called Partners in Need, Partners Indeed, Tracking Europe-Taiwan Relations Amidst Global Disruption. So today in the studio, we're very honored to have two perfect guests to talk about this report. The first one is Dr. Zsuzsa Ferenczy. She is a visiting fellow at the Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies based in Brussels, but she spent 5 years in Taiwan teaching at Donghua University as an adjunct professor. Welcome, Zsuzsa. And we also have the editor of this huge project, Matej Šimalčík, who is the executive director at the Central European Institute of Asian Studies. Welcome, you both.
Thanks for welcoming us.
Thanks for having us.
Good, yeah. So I've known you guys for quite some time. It's really a great day for me to finally have you in the studio. So, well, first of all, Matej, you're the editor of this project. And as I know, it's a year-long project. Can you tell us what inspired you to do such a huge report?
Yeah, even before the visit by Vice President Xiaobi came to Brussels that you've mentioned in the introduction, we've seen this growing interest on both sides in Europe and in Taiwan in pursuing relations. This really started around 2020 when a lot of these disruptions in the global order were starting to emerge.
Because of COVID, but also preceding that, we had really erosion of confidence across Europe, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, in China, right? Which was spurring these countries to look for new partners in the Pacific region, including with Taiwan, right? And so this led us to thinking that we really need to properly look into what individual European states are doing together with Taiwan, how they are cooperating, how they are navigating the international constraints around engaging Taiwan, and especially the risks, which are often imagined, the risks of China's pushback. So because of this, we thought that we need to do this sort of robust analysis of Europe's relations with Taiwan, which has so far not really been done, neither in Europe nor in Taiwan. There's been a lot of new books and papers on Europe-Taiwan relations, but largely constrained on the level of European Union as a whole, right? So sort of top-to-bottom approach to analyzing the relationship. Zsuzsa's recent book is a very good example of this, and that is also a very important approach, how to
investigate the relations between Europe and Taiwan, but the reverse approach, the bottom-up approach, where we would look at individual European states and what they are doing with Taiwan, has really been missing so far.
And how many are they?
Yeah, so we did focus on 30 countries in Europe, as well as EU institutions as an actor in its own right. So the EU, of course, has 27 member states. So all of them were included in this project, as well as 3 key non-EU European states that are deeply integrated economically with the EU,
Which
UK,
are
Switzerland, and Norway. All
Right.
of them having very different type of relations with Taiwan as well.
So when people in Taiwan talk about Europe, some of them think maybe 1 or 2 countries, but the European Union is a combination or a salad ball of 30 countries, if not more, right?
Yeah, I mean, Europe is even bigger than those 30 states. We still don't have the picture in the Western Balkans, for example, in the analysis, or Ukraine, right, which has also been engaging with Taiwan due to Russian invasion, although somewhat indirectly engaging. But that would even further make the picture more complex, right? So sticking to the EU member states and those 3 closely linked economies allows us to make some interesting comparisons. But of course,
Right.
we should not forget about the rest of Europe, and maybe we can do a future project in the next iteration or something, where we will also include all of these other countries, which are also on a path to EU membership, essentially, right? So
Right, yeah. So how was it like to work with 26 different authors? Yeah, it's a huge project.
One is here.
yeah.
Yeah, what was it like? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Did you regret this at any point when you were commissioning?
Many times. But
Yeah.
the product is all worth it, right? Of course, Zsuzsa was one of the great authors contributing to our project, focusing with her analysis on a chapter about EU institutional relations with Taiwan. But of course, we want to have individual local experts, essentially, on Taiwan from all of these countries to paint the picture of what the relationship looks like, right? So you indeed need to find these experts in all of the 30 countries that we were focusing on.
That's a huge effort
Fortunately,
itself.
I was not the only editor. I have the 2 colleagues from my institute co-editing the paper, Kristina Kironska and Alfred Gerstel. So we did split the workload a bit, right? In terms of reviewing the chapters, dealing with the authors, responding to their questions. But yeah, I mean, as with any collaborative project, there are challenges, but the end result is, I think, very much worth all of the hard work that not just us as editors, but crucially the individual authors put into this project.
I encourage you to download this huge project from the website of Theus. And the next question is for Zsuzsa. So what do you think, what makes this moment a crucial moment for Taiwan and Europe relations?
Well, first, let me just say thank you again for having us and for, keeping such a close eye on our work, supporting it, and also giving a platform to share our observations, reflections, and also for kind of complementing each other, because you sit in Taiwan as a Taiwanese and we're Europeans and we are frequently in Taiwan. But I think these conversations always are so useful, and I hope so for the audience as well, to kind of understand each other better. But more on that later when we dive deeper into the core of this relationship. So back to your question. I spent the last 3 months in Europe, and my observations are that Europe is quite in a difficult place. And I would say perhaps everyone in their own countries would say the same thing, that they feel the geopolitics shifting really fast and not having enough time to catch up and be prepared for what's coming without knowing what's coming. So in this context of really anxiety and depressive mood that is really heavy on all of us, I would say, finding EU-Taiwan relations is not an easy task.
There's no bandwidth for it, you feel. So you mentioned the disruptions that uneasy situations that people face. What would be an example of disruption? For example, what's troubling people in Europe?
I mean, you will not be surprised if I tell you that everyone's concerned about the future of Ukraine and Russia and how we will deal with this, not just any end to it, but make sure that this is the proper end that is sustainable. So this is on top of everyone's mind. And, we converge on the need to secure Ukraine's future, because securing Ukraine's future is securing Europe's future. So that is on top of everyone's mind. But immediately to the Russia factor, I would add the China factor. And then immediately to that, or perhaps even on top of that, since a couple of weeks or days now, it's the Trump factor. And this is in light of the national security strategy that was recently adopted.
Zsuzsa and Matej, you both mentioned the China factor. Can you go a little bit, provide a little bit details? What would it be about China that troubles people in Europe?
Well, we have been troubled by our relationship with China for a couple of years. And as you both already agreed here that the EU is 27 countries, which means it's 27 different voices. And that's not even all of it. It's within each country, you have different political factors, voices, you have society that has their own views on how we should go forward. So we are dealing with an asymmetric relationship when it comes to trade that is weighing heavily on European competitiveness. And we are in the process of rethinking it all in light of our feeling, rightly so, of being abandoned by our closest ally, which is the United States. So everyone is worried, but these worries again kind of diverge, because if you go from Portugal to Greece and up to Lithuania, you will speak about China, but you will hear very different discourse on China. So on one hand, briefly, you have the political intentions and ambitions. And I would say at the European level, shaped by the European Parliament or the Commission, there is a clear understanding that we need to change things fast.
But how?
So this is to equip ourselves with the right tools and the right partners to work with. And this is where Taiwan comes in, rightly so, with the title of the report, Partners Indeed, is that to have those tools, and that's not even all of it, is to use the tools that we have in an effective way to push back against attempts to weaponize dependencies that we have on China. So I'm being a bit more clear on the fact that we have critical dependencies when it comes to industrial capacity, and we need to rethink, and we need to diversify, and we need to be less reliant on imports. We need to strengthen our defense. So security and prosperity go hand in hand, and we are rethinking that. So this is on top of people's minds, and it's hard to find a bright spot in that. I think the bright spot comes in when we identify who do we do this with. It's been the United States, but I think we're very clear on the fact that we cannot rely on the United States, not in light of recent developments. So I just want to circle back to Taiwan, that we need to look further to where we sit, which is the Indo-Pacific, and Taiwan is at the heart of it.
Right.
Yeah, I would completely agree with what you just said. Just a few more thoughts on what are the concerns with China and how that maybe also impacts Europe's relations with Taiwan, right? Because it's two separate issues essentially, right? On one hand, how EU navigates the relationship with China directly, but also how China impacts EU's relationship with Taiwan. You've mentioned, Zsuzsa, before that we have essentially 27 views within EU on China. And on top of that, we have a separate view maybe in the EU Commission as well, right? The same goes for Taiwan, right? We have 27 individual countries who have a very different reading of risks and benefits of the relationship with Taiwan. On top of that, 27 individual one China policies, each very differently defined and interpreted. EU having its own reading of it all as well, right? So this complicates matters quite a bit. But Also, I think we need to recognize that however the member states of European Union are approaching Taiwan and how they are reading the potential risk of China's retaliation is also something that is not static, right? Everything is in
Right.
flux and evolving, and we do see across Europe, broadly speaking, of course, not in every country, but in Europe as a whole, majority of countries having increasingly more flexible approach to Taiwan and being more and more open to engaging openly.
At least more and more people recognize that Taiwan is not Thailand, right? Two different countries. I think that's a good start.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you really said it really precisely. I think this is time to recalibrate the relations. And I think this is a good time also for Matej to share a little bit of the most important findings of the paper. But before that, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll hear from Matej. Welcome back to the Taiwanology podcast. This is your host, Kwangyin from CommonWealth magazine. In our studio today, we have Dr. Zsuzsa Ferenczy and Matej Šimalčík from the Central European Institute of Asian Studies. We are here to talk about Europe-Taiwan relations, which is a huge topic. And we're just about to get into, Matej, the main findings of the paper. The most interesting part I find is the 4 categories of the EU member states. So please tell us.
Yeah, I mean, in the first part, we've mentioned it a little bit that we did see this rapid growth in ties with Taiwan across Europe, essentially a 5-fold increase. But of course, not all countries engage equally with Taiwan, right? They have different readings of their priorities, different interpretations of their own One China policies, etc., that factor into how they navigate the relationship. If we sort of step back and do a little bit of abstraction, we do see a trend that we were able to come up with this categorization of countries and how they approach Taiwan. It's a 4-point category devised based on quantitative and qualitative evaluation of political and economic relations of each country with Taiwan. So the 4 categories that we came up with is essentially the first one being old partners of Taiwan. So countries that sort of have been engaging Taiwan for quite a long while. The relationship is more or less settled, is not really questioned domestically, and it's fairly mature. There we included 3 countries, Germany, France, and also UK from those non-EU European countries that we focused on. Next up, we have new friends, so countries that started to engage Taiwan or re-engage in some cases a bit later on, essentially coincided with this big shift in the early 2020s. We have 3 countries there, Czechia, Lithuania, and Poland. The biggest group, the third group, would be the pragmatists, the countries that are not so politically active with Taiwan, but they do have rather robust economic relations, and they are interested in building the economic relations. That's the biggest group. Almost half of the European countries, essentially, or maybe even a little bit more than half the European countries is there. So you have there countries like Netherlands, for example, right? A country that's crucial to Taiwan's economy, but rarely engages in open political relations with Taiwan, or the Nordic countries, for example, right? And last but not least, we have the laggard group. So comparatively, group of countries that has almost no interactions with Taiwan. You can see, for example, Bulgaria there, Romania, Greece, even Cyprus, which to this day is the only EU country with 0 public engagements on record in our database of EU-Taiwan interactions. But also Latvia and Estonia, right? So it is a fairly diverse group. But one thing they do have in common is that none of these countries currently has a representative office in Taiwan, right? Which also tells us something about the quality of the relationship. Of course, we know that Estonia is negotiating about opening representative offices, right? So maybe we will have to bump it up a category
It's ongoing.
next time
Yes.
we do this kind of evaluation.
Maybe we have to reevaluate in the next installment of the paper.
Yes.
Right. So these are the 27 EU member states. And Zsuzsa, so maybe you could dissect for us from the EU perspective, how has the EU's engagement with Taiwan evolved in the past few years?
Well, let me just say thank you also to Matej for mentioning my book earlier, which came out last year, that covers the EU's as an institutional level of engagement vis-a-vis Taiwan and how this has evolved in the past years. And this is basically the background of my recent addition to this new report, because I followed these relationships evolved as I was sitting in Taiwan for the past 5 years. But before I moved to Taiwan, I worked in the European Parliament for 12 years. And that really gave me this insight view on how institutions work and how complicated it all is. But in the end, it kind of works. I mean, we exist as the EU. So I think that's a good moment to kind of bring a little bit of positive energy here around the table to everything we said about the depressive times that we live in. But I would say that those same factors that Matej mentioned in terms of the shocks and disruptions, of course, the biggest two recent shocks were Russian invasion of Ukraine and China's support to that. And then before that, we had the pandemic, but we also had changing China and how the perception of Europe, of China, has changed in light of that. So all of this kind of pushed the EU to sober up and look at Taiwan on its own merit, not as a subchapter of our relationship with China. And I think this is the biggest, in a way, argument I make in this report that the audience will discover when they download the report. And also all the writings that I've published recently, that I think this is a momentum that emerged in light of these developments. And I feel very strongly that this is something that is here to stay. So I know we are burdened by all these shocks, and I think there's no end in sight to that after the latest shock that we're experiencing from our closest ally. And I know I've said this before, but I think we have to keep coming back to it, because this is really what's defining not just who we are, but who we can partner with. So I think all this all together really has created an opportunity, I would say, for the EU to look at Taiwan with more of a strategic idea of why Taiwan matters, where Taiwan sits matters here in the Indo-Pacific, and how this is important in how we rethink our relationship with the entire region. So the opportunity was seized, I would say, and this was mostly shaped by parliamentary diplomacy. So this is, again, part of my research, that the European Parliament played a very significant role to facilitate that, to push this forward through different initiatives, reports, resolutions, delegation visits, and this constant back and forth that was reciprocated also by Taiwan and often initiated with visits from Taiwan to EU member states. So I think we are at a stage where all of this is solid, but things are changing. So because circumstances are changing, we need to rethink, okay, how do we protect what we built up at the European level, where the European Commission is more at ease with mentioning Taiwan, with saying that peace and security in the Taiwan Strait, it is in Europe's interest.
Do you think they're more at ease now than before?
I would say definitely more at ease. So things you hear in 2025, you did not hear in 2018-19. Things started to shift in 2020 when this Taiwan narrative started to emerge that really the European Parliament pushed for in its own resolutions. And, you know, when these resolutions are debated in the European Parliament, which is essentially, it functions as a parliament. So just for the audience, it might sound very complicated, but it is a parliament where you have parliamentarians debating an issue. And in these debates, you would invite members of the European Commission or the president of the European Commission. And if she was not available, then someone else would come in and speak and address the House. And in these joint sessions, you would find the commissioners speak kind of like the European Parliament, in the sense of using the same concerns and same arguments that Taiwan matters. Taiwan is an advanced and robust democracy and plays a crucial role in terms of economic security.
And these words were, you would not have heard it from a European parliamentarian 5 years ago, I don't think.
Yeah, those were very different times, right?
Yeah,
and so we wouldn't hear, and Taiwan, I mean, I would say I think the question that you might want to ask, perhaps, and I get, and I'm sure Matej, you also get it, how much of a priority is Taiwan for us?
Yes.
And again, then how do you define priorities is a very big question. But if you ask me as a European who now spends time and research in Europe, I would say that our priorities are definitely shaped by our dependencies and understanding our dependencies and overcoming those in security and competitiveness. So we are really pushing for an industrial policy that delivers and a defense policy that equally delivers in the long run. In the short term, we can't fix things. Like even if we feel under a lot of pressure from Washington, we are not able to. We don't have the capacity. We have 27 different defense markets. So long story short, in this context, if that's the picture, where does Taiwan fit in? Well, we need to make sure that Taiwan stays where we put it in these past 5 years, at the heart of the Indo-Pacific strategy. Right. So if I say it's not a priority, this does not by any means mean that it doesn't matter. Taiwan matters, and I think Europe also matters for Taiwan. I mean,
yes, but I think it's time that Taiwan also step up its game. So you mentioned a few keywords. I think we should pay attention to defense, reindustrialization, resilience, and dependencies. So I think it's time for Taiwanese government officials and maybe businesses to think about what Taiwan can offer Europe.
On that point, I think that's absolutely key. And it's not just for Taiwan, it's for Europe itself, for the government to work together with the industry and for this to be an inclusive process, because none of the things that Europe wants to get done in defense, in semiconductors, in AI will work just because they agreed on doing so between the 27 countries on paper. This is work that needs to be done by the industry and the business sector. So as you rightly say, this needs to be done the same way in Taiwan's case.
Yeah, and because what Taiwan does best is manufacturing things. And that's, coming from me, because I work for Business Magazine, and that's also how I feel. And I just concluded a trip to Texas where a lot of Taiwanese companies are going to invest in manufacturing servers, chips, and stuff there. So I would very much like to see similar things happen in Europe, because I really do believe that's where the market is going, because each market needs its own capacity. So I think we will have to wrap up very quickly. But before that, I would need to ask you, what would the recommendations be for Taiwan if we want to ride this momentum and improve Taiwan-EU relations going forward? So maybe Matej can go first.
Sure. So we do have also with Zsuzsa a lot of debates about to what extent should Taiwan focus on substance versus symbolism, right? And this is a key dilemma that Taiwan is facing in Europe, but also we, I think, need to recognize that both aspects are important for Taiwan strategy moving forward. Of course, substance is something that the European partners of Taiwan are very much looking for, and it was mentioned during the previous question that there are very specific needs that EU has in terms of developing its defense industry, in terms of developing its overall economic competitiveness, making supply chains more resilient and immune from China's pressures, so that the traditional backbones of European economy can work, right? Like the automotive sector that's heavily reliant on supply of semiconductors, for example, right? So this is one area where Taiwan should be focusing, and it is already happening to some extent, right? Like the ongoing project to set up the TSMC subsidiary in Germany, in Dresden. But also we should still talk about the symbolic engagements, right? So that we can move the conversation on Taiwan along, right? So if you just think about how the whole sort of floodgates for engagement with Taiwan in Europe opened. It started with a symbolic engagement, the Czech Senate President Vystrčil coming to Taiwan and motivating essentially the rest of Europe to start engaging more, right? So there is some sweet spot that Taiwan will need to find between these two poles in the strategy, substance and symbolism, but ultimately both of them are crucial for an efficient strategy of engaging Europe.
But what does Taiwan need to do more? Because in the paper I did read, there's a recommendation that Taiwan needs to deliver on the economic promises. So can you elaborate on that?
Yes, so this goes to the substance part, right? Of course, we do see in Europe some worrying trends domestically when it comes to rise of populism, for example. And I do recognize that delivering economic results can take time, right? New investments don't pop up from one day to another. They even like semiconductor industry, which is something that a lot of European countries are interested in. It takes time. It takes developing work first, and Taiwan is supporting that process as well in Europe. But in some of the countries that were essentially the vanguards of engaging Taiwan, like Lithuania or even Czech Republic, you do hear opposition leaders that may not be so interested in engaging Taiwan solely for being a like-minded partner, that this needs to be coupled with economic benefits for the country. Crucially, in Czech Republic, for example, we do have a new government just formed by a populist prime minister who will probably not be interested so much in the symbolic engagement if it's not matched with actual economic benefits for the country as well. So this is something that Taiwan will need to also consider moving forward, essentially to make sure that these type of leaders for whom democracy and like-mindedness are not so crucial as tangible benefits feel that the relationship is also working.
Yeah, so I think economy is really at the heart of the issue. And I think a lot of the business people in Taiwan will tell you the same. I feel like they are being squeezed from all sides. They, on one hand, facing pressure from the US, and many of them are investing in the US, and then you have the pull from Europe as well, right? So these are definitely challenges they have to navigate. And right, so I think that would be all the time we had for today. But before that, Zsuzsa, do you have some final comments to make about the report?
Perhaps just wanted to come back when I think everyone feels squeezed by everyone else, and who doesn't feel that is probably asleep. I think Europe is definitely reacting to that, and I think when it comes to our relationship with Taiwan, like I said, I want to keep a positive note on that we are moving forward, and the way we evaluate what it means to move forward, I think there's high expectations and the delivery is important. But I think we need to also be better at how we evaluate who does what in the EU. Again, this goes back to the EU being complicated. So we should not compare the EU and what the EU does with what the US does. We're not comparable. We are 27 countries versus 1 in the United States. So this is important for, I think, people to understand what we do and what we can do. Of course, we should not overpromise, because then we will underdeliver. So that's important. And I think the dilemma of substance versus symbolism is very important, and I think we need to understand what it means to Taiwan, when they ask for symbolism, and why Europeans ask for substance, and why this is not on the same page. I think we need to overcome that dilemma with not a versus kind of situation, but we need to understand that both are important. We just need to have the right balance. Of course, that's the most difficult thing. But again, I think the report brings a lot of insights from all the different countries. And on top of that, I think the EU level kind of engagement is something that Taiwan needs to take seriously, as we must take seriously. And last point on that, I just want to say that I think Taiwan has a lot of agency. And I think this is also something new and part of this momentum, where we're not just looking at Taiwan, we're having this conversation with Taiwan. Mm-hmm. So Taiwan needs to have this conversation with Europe.
We're an active partner, yeah.
And be an active partner, because that's the definition of partnership. And that's also the title of the report and also title of my book.
You wrap it up very perfectly. Yeah. So just a few days ago, when we had the event in European Values Center, the Czech Hub, there was one poster I saw that I really liked. It says, united in diversity. And I think that sums up what European Union is really, really, really nicely. And also what is Taiwan as well, right? So thank you very much for coming into the studio today. And if you listeners, if you're interested in reading the report, please find this paper on the website of CEIAS. It's called Partners in Need, Partners Indeed, Tracking Europe-Taiwan Relations Amidst Global Disruption. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So thanks for listening. This is the Taiwanology podcast. Stay tuned for more reporting soon. Our next episode will be online January 27th. Bye-bye and see you next time.